Okay, welcome to a class on suffixes, and today we're going to look at the suffix eyes and eyes because I got a very good question today, and of course it's not the first time I have been asked this question of should we use an S or a Z in these words, and there are many, so usually they're verbs but there are many nouns as well. Should we use an S or a Z? Because I'm certain you have noticed, as I have, that when you read texts, sometimes people use an S and sometimes people use a Z, and it gets really confusing. What should we do? Are both correct? Is it up to us? Is it our choice? Or do you have to use one over the other? And the short answer, which teachers very often tell you, is number 2. And I hope to show you that number 2 is actually incorrect. But the teachers usually say, and the dictionaries say this as well, and so I have every sympathy with my colleagues. I have often said this too, because the dictionaries tell us, well, UK dictionaries, Cambridge and Oxford, both say that this ISE is the UK version and IZE is the US version. But I'm going to show you that that's actually not true. Yeah, but that's what the dictionaries say. But as always, you can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody these days. You have to do your own research, and that's what we will do today. And I had this idea thanks to a wonderful website, random-idea-english.blogspot.com. It's Will's website. He's a TEFL teacher, and he did a really good essay on the difference between these two suffixes over time, how they have been used in UK English over time. And it's a really interesting essay, and so please, if you look for Random Idea English Blogspot, ISE, and if you go to his article which is called Random Thoughts on ISE words, you will read a really interesting essay and you'll get all the details. I'm going to give you an overview of the points that he makes in that essay because he answers this question in great detail, and it's a very good answer. So if you want to know the full answer of which one to use, watch till the end of the class and you will find out. So as I say, the dictionaries usually say that, or certainly Cambridge says, usually realise in the UK, but realise in the US. Usually recognise with an S in the UK. Usually organise with an S in the UK. And the same goes for the nouns. Cambridge tells you that organisation is usually in the UK. You see that spelling. Organisation is US. Civilization usually in the UK, yeah, and civilization in the US. But it really isn't that simple, actually. There's 3 possible positions we might take. We might say that in UK English both are correct, but be consistent. With these kind of words, if you're always using IZE, well then do it for all of them and don't go into ISE for some. Don't write realise and then recognise, one with an S and one with a Z. Try to be consistent. Personally, I find that very difficult. Very often I'm sure that I have mixed up ISE and IZE in most of the work that I have written. So sadly, I'm not very consistent, but you should try to be consistent if you take this position number 1, and I would say that that's the correct position. That is correct. Both are correct, but be consistent. I would say that is true, certainly. And according to dictionaries, that is true. So number 1 is the case. But very often teachers tell you in UK English, avoid IZE, avoid organisation with a Z, civilization with a Z, criticise with a Z, organise with a Z, recognise with a Z. They tell you to avoid it as it is American. And I've got to say, I think Will does a really good job of showing you that that is false. That's not true. And how do we know that's not true? Well, because in the UK, many years ago, from 1600, in all of those old texts, like Pilgrim's Progress or something like that, those old books from a long time ago, the IZE form was dominant. You saw more of these, you saw more of IZE than ISE. And that's how we know that number 2 is wrong. It's wrong to say that IZE is American when many British books, perhaps the majority, used IZE more often than ISE. So number 2 is not correct. It's a misunderstanding, and it perhaps comes from the fact that the dictionaries say usually UK. And so teachers think, okay, I'm a UK teacher, I'll tell them to use this and to avoid that. But that's not actually good advice. Number 3, and this was by a very highly respected grammarian, possibly the most famous grammarian in the English language, a guy called Fowler. He wrote this book, The King's English, and he also wrote Modern English Usage. I think Modern English Usage. It's really good. I really enjoyed this book. And so he's a really interesting guy. Well, he points out that IZE has been used by many British authors, English, people from Britain, not just America. IZE has been used in the UK for centuries. And so he says, avoid ISE. This is the complete opposite opinion to number 2. Number 2 says avoid IZE. Well, Fowler told us in about I think that was published in 1907, something like that. And so Fowler tells us at the start of the 20th century to avoid ISE. And that's interesting because IZE becomes dominant again from about 1920. We'll look at this in a moment because this is using Google Ngrams, a particular piece of software that we can use that's online and anybody can use it. Just type in Ngrams into Google and you'll find this software where you can compare how often one word is used and another word is used, how often one spelling is used and another spelling is used over a very long period of time. And so that's how we get this information here. But we'll talk about that in a second, because I want to make something very clear from the start.